Can I maybe start with you, Ken, as you pack up and begin to leave this place? You leave, as we speak at the moment, on Thursday, not a Conservative MP. Did you think it would ever come to that?
Well, it's a rather comic footnote to my career, really. It's a slightly ridiculous position. I think, on the whole, people have regarded me as a Conservative for most of the last 50 years. So they had this bizarre idea that they'd be able to bounce everything through if they threatened to take the whip away. And I think they were rather shocked when they took it away from 21, and it was one of the things that went wrong with the grand plan when they first got in. And it's made not the faintest practical or any other difference to my daily life here or anywhere else.
No bruises?
Not really, no. I thought it was just a silly thing to do. I was angry on behalf of my younger colleagues in mid-career, and it is one of the things that turned a lot of moderate Conservatives off the idea of pursuing their political careers at all, which is a very serious loss. So there was a bad downside to it. For somebody like me, who'd long ago announced I was retiring anyway, just a daft thing to do.
Iain, do you feel it was a mistake or a necessary piece of purification, as some people have actually said?
No, I don't think it's anything to do with purification. I think it was... I'm a great believer that things are more cock-up than conspiracy in life. People think that the gesture will stop everybody doing it. When they do it, they're not quite sure what to do after that, really, which is that there were a lot more people, I think.
What about Ken's point that it might affect the people who carry on or come in, and it will actually have a purifying effect in that sense?
I think a lot of this will go by. I think a number of people have got the whip back. I've written recently to say I think that was a good idea. Personally, I think... Not
many of them are coming back.
Well, some have chosen to go anyway. I mean, I don't know the situation on those who were leaving anyway. I don't know what the situation is there. But my view is if people have chosen to stay and want to fight the next election and they're prepared to support government in general, I mean, the whip should be returned to them.
But it seems to fit in with certain other sort of dramatic bits of Number 10 action in the last few months, doesn't it, Ken?
Well, the crash-bang-wallop approach to government, which has prevailed so far, has had all kinds of extraordinary things happening, like calling an election simply because Parliament wanted to discuss the details of a rushed agreement, withdrawal agreement that had been done. It was just bizarre to react to the insistence on Parliament that it must discuss the details, which the Prime Minister and the Brexit Secretary plainly didn't understand at first, because they didn't understand that they had signed up to a real customs border down the Irish Sea. Once Parliament wanted to debate it, the next impulse was to call an election. Whoever wins this election has got to restore a somewhat more ordered system of government. And I hope they don't fight this people versus Parliament election, which they've been dying to do for the last 6 months, because they will further damage confidence in Parliament and the functioning of Parliament. We want a proper, grown-up, democratic government in this country, which has got to be accountable.
I think that the truth is that the government, that Boris Johnson wanted to get, I genuinely do think he wanted to get a deal. I think he felt hamstrung by the vote that said you had to take no deal off the table. But, in the end, we got a deal. It's not perfect by a long way. I mean, lots of things that I have difficulties with, but, I think getting a deal through is the most important thing. My concern would have been that I said earlier on, I would like to have seen that deal got through. I wish that all sides could have agreed a timetable. We could have got it through and done. That would have been my perfect pitch. Then we could have gone to an election. I don't think he wanted to have an election before we left, because his target was to leave by the 31st. But I think subsequently, when he decided that he didn't think he could get it through and it would meander, and he was worried that it would just build up more and more time taken into December, back into January, was his concern, that he decided the only way was to have an election, clear the air. Will it be Parliament versus the people? I doubt that, actually. I think this is going to be, like all elections, no election I've ever seen, and certainly not under this ridiculous fixed-term Parliament Act that set 6 weeks, which is an intolerable amount of time to asking the British people to keep focusing on who governs them. But my general view is you can't, over 6 weeks, as the 2017 election demonstrated to us absolutely, is that an issue can last only so long. There are lots of other issues, and elections are not like referendums. You don't just run one issue the whole time. There'll be the health service, there'll be the economy, which didn't make it into the 2017
The trouble is, nobody's got any policy on that. On the health service and schools, the two big parties just compete with sums of money now. There's no real policy on them, so I don't know what will emerge.
There aren't any fiscal rules.
Funny enough, although it wasn't the intention, I think he did always want the election come before the deal took effect. Actually, he did try for an election for that, because if there is any confusion or anything goes wrong when we actually leave, he didn't want to be in office. He wanted to be in office with a majority by then, safely in office to deal with it. He didn't want an election to be held after any chaos that occurred on the day that he left. He's accidentally put the other parties into business, because the Liberals have now got a clear policy. If they say we don't leave the EU, the Brexit Party have a clear policy. They say we don't want any of these deals, just leave. And it's the two major parties are themselves divided, and their official policies are unbelievably confused.
You think this is a gamble that might not work?
Oh, I think it's a seriously risky gamble. I mean, I don't know whether it will work, because I think anybody who tries to forecast the result of all this, because exactly as Iain says, you can't foresee how the climate and the subject matter will change over a period of 6 weeks, when so many of the public on all sides are so angry and disillusioned and not settled in their opinions. It's totally impossible to forecast. But it's anybody's guess as to what sort of government we'll have in 6 weeks' time.
Do you agree with that, Iain?
Well, I'm a little less. I agree with the whole nature of the fact that we should recognise always that general elections are, the word general does in fact matter, because the public will pick the issues that they think are important. So you will always get the Jennifer's ear issue that erupts in the middle of a campaign and throws you away from your programme. So, and in 6 weeks, which by the way I think is far too long for an election, but notwithstanding that, in 6 weeks it does mean fatigue sets in at some point, and some really small issues will suddenly erupt. But I think the one thing I will say, I was against the 2017 election. I told the Prime Minister then, you do not need to call this election. You have a majority, get on and do the job that they set you to do and get it done. But they got tempted with the idea that polling told them they were okay. I always think that's a bad position to be in. But having said that, I think that this time round, I think there are some clearer points here. There is a genuine difference, which you will see, which you'll see under the Labour launch. There is now, for the first time, I think, in a long time, quite an ideological break between political parties, defined more by Labour than by the Conservatives, which is, we're going back to the kind of Michael Foot agenda of massive nationalisation, huge socialism going on. That's what Corbyn stands for. That's fine. That's his reality. That's what he wants to stand for. And I think this debate will be about Brexit, but I think it's going to rapidly move across to what kind of society, what kind of economy do you want? And I think that will be a very big player in this election, without question. I think in that regard, the Conservatives will come back together again quite firmly, and this is a big battle. I think I've written this as the biggest, I think, and most important election in my political lifetime. I mean, Ken sat through others that he would have said early on were big ones, but this one is going to be quite an ideological election on domestic policy.
Your analysis there, Iain's analysis there, Ken, is that it's the Labour Party that's moved, and that's the defining thing in this election. To your eyes, does it look as though the Conservative Party has moved out to the right as well?
Yes, as in every other Western democracy, I think Parliament actually reflects public opinion, which is also confused and has polarised, and with no clear majority for anything. It annoys the public, because most members of the public think everybody agrees with them, most sensible people. So why don't these people in Parliament just do what I think? In fact, if they listen to their neighbours more carefully, the polarisation and confusion is very widely held, with people with completely opposite views very angry about it in the general public. But it does make it a terribly uncertain election. The Labour Party are on the biggest problem, because I agree with the description of the way they're going that Iain gave. And of all the leading figures, I don't think Jeremy Corbyn is likely to be elected Prime Minister in 1,000 years. I don't think Jeremy really thinks he's going to win, but the Labour Party's made almost unelectable, not totally because of how far they've gone to the left in itself, but because Jeremy himself has become a hugely unpopular figure. And another reason for moving so quickly in Downing Street may have been to get this election in before the Labour Party could get rid of him.
Yes.
But I think the public will.
But Iain Duncan Smith quoted on the front of the Times today saying of the Conservatives, "We are the Brexit Party now." Small p, but nonetheless, that's the quote.
Well, the point I'm making in that was aimed at the Brexit Party, was that if only Brexit can be delivered by the Conservative Party and there's a deal and we want to get that deal through and that delivers Brexit, we may not all agree that we like Brexit or dislike Brexit, but the point I'm trying to make is that the Brexit Party as a single issue party isn't going to, I don't believe, be in any situation where they can essentially win an election or even kind of form any part of a government. But what they can do is, of course, they can very quickly lay the way open for others who simply don't want to. And I was looking at the Liberal Democrats.
Well, but the party has. I mean, the one reason so many moderate Conservatives, much younger than me, are retiring, not as in my case, because I've been here for 50 years and I'm getting on a bit, but because in their case they're abandoning the political careers they were following because they don't know what's happening to the Conservative Party. I hope it's only temporary, but again, the number 10 apparatchiks, these professional campaigners and so on, plainly think that they've got to make themselves the Brexit Party and just they're going to sweep the north of England with all kinds of Labour working class voters will forget their cultural background and will ignore the state of their public services or their town or whatever and will vote Tory. Now, I think a lot of the danger, now, on all wings of the Conservative Party in Parliament, this is a fear shared, I think, the danger is that people who really are very anti-Europe and very hardline Brexiteers and desperately impatient for us to leave will vote for the real thing. And Nigel Farage is clear and uncomplicated in the policy he puts forward.
But meanwhile,
it's no good the Conservative Party just imitating that and using the Conservative brand to try to promote the Brexit Party's agenda, which they're not following anyway.
But you think you could change they could accidentally or on purpose change the Conservative Party in the process? It will not be the same party.
Well, the leadership part, it must be down to Boris in the end. There's no good me continually attributing it to these powerful public relations people he seems to have brought in. But they do seem to be trying to make themselves look like the Brexit Party, which is going to repel an awful lot of people in both directions. Quite a lot to the Liberal Democrats, quite a lot will go for the real thing, because Nigel Farage does put the whole thing more clearly and in a less complicated way than the Conservative Party has been doing for the last 6 months.
I'm a little more sanguine than that, Ken. I mean, I think that the point is that the Conservative Party is a much broader party. This is the point. It's a party that covers all the issues. The Brexit issue has to be settled because it is eating away at us as a party. It's eating away as a country. You know, we can't move on until it's settled. And the point that I make about this is we need to settle that. But there are huge issues that have got to be dealt with. I mean, you know, I set up the Centre for Social Justice. You know, the party is a broad church. There are people, and it must always remain a broad church, there are people in all kind of different views about it that collect together around a basic set of values. But, you know, we don't all march like tin soldiers in one direction. We've always had a debate, and Ken will know that.
Particularly on Europe.
Yeah, well, Europe, but even on other issues, we debate and discuss stuff. My point is that the party itself, the Conservative Party, will need to get this issue sorted. And once this issue is sorted, you know, we can, I hope, return to what I call the proper and normal way. I think the party
one wonders whether you might break the party in the process.
Well, because I do agree with Iain that I mean, over the years, all the years we've been in Parliament together, the Conservative Party has not been divided on anything but Europe much, not significantly. There's always been a free markets with a social conscience approach, and with obviously a range of instincts and approaches, but it's just why we've been the natural governing party for most of the last half century. Because we're in new territory. I've never seen this present policy of fanatical pursuit of on the Brexit issue, of making that the central subject, and tax on Parliament, and which I hope won't make it too difficult to eventually put the party back together again as a governing party, competent economic policies and serious reforming policies on huge subjects like social care, which we don't seem to have a policy on at all at the moment.
It's an extraordinary moment, isn't it? For nearly 50 years in this Parliament, and when you came in, Ken, your type of approach to Europe was the dominant mainstream approach in the Conservative Party, and Iain was the fringe.
Well, I've been here as long as Ken.
But people like Iain were the fringe back when you first came into Parliament.
Well, they were certainly the small minority, the comparatively small minority. Yes.
And now...
And it overnight almost happened after one vote, quite a close-run vote, 3 years ago. I mean, going back to your teasing and pulling my leg about this bizarre loss of the whip I've experienced, and I've had the good fortune for most of my entire career being a mainstream Tory. I mean, no member of the public who knew anything about the politics would have thought I was anything but a Conservative, and my views were pretty broadly in line with those of the party, and that's probably why I held office for such a long time, until 3 years ago. Now, the policies upon which the party is standing now don't resemble the policies of Ted Heath and Margaret Thatcher and John Major and the people that I served. You know, it was Macmillan made us a pro-European party. I remember at this first party conference I went to, defending the decision to join the European Community, and we were a pro-European. The official party, the leadership, was pro-European ever after. Margaret never wanted to leave the European Union. She was very against the political ambitions of Europe, to be fair. She always was. For her, it was an economic thing. But she always believed that the single market was a Thatcherite creation. And so 3 years ago, somebody like me found I was expected to do a complete U-turn, stand on my head on what I believe to be the Conservative policies, which had certainly been my opinion hitherto for my entire political career.
Do you, Iain, feel, even though you have personal regard for Ken, a sense of triumph?
Yeah, we always get on well with each other.
Yeah. But do you feel a sense of triumph? You were labouring on the fringes for years. You come, and now the party is yours. The mission is the central one that you wanted.
I voted to join the European communities. It wasn't the common market, I think is how we used to refer to it in those days. And I didn't come to leaving the European until quite late on, probably not until, probably 3-4 years ago. I mean, Ken's talking back 3-4 years, probably when in the government, because I'd put it behind me. The fact is, Maastricht, the one thing I did say was that I thought Maastricht and the subsequent treaties would change the relationship dramatically between how we saw it and how it seemed to be going. Now, I just said that I think that will test in future our membership. But even at the time of Maastricht, I was opposed to Maastricht. I wasn't opposed to being a member. I came to the process of deciding that finally I don't think we can change this. I think this is bound on a course that I think eventually doesn't work for us. That's the view. It's not, I love Europe. I have to tell you this. I speak Italian. I've got sisters who lived and worked all their lives in Italy. I love the culture. I love everything to do with it. And I consider myself a European. I think the difference has been what direction is this going in now. That's another debate. We won't enter that now. But I do say...
The reversal of fortune in the party, the fact that the people who want us out now run the show, and you go seeking like-minded voters out there who want to leave, And that is an extraordinary reversal of fortune for Ken's
it's
end
a
of the party.
it's a reversal of.
Do you not feel a sense of triumph?
No, I don't. What I do think is that I think the Conservative Party, at the end of the day, always finds that it tends to follow where its vote and the public tend to drift. In other words, on lots of things, things we were absolutely against 40 years ago, we've moved on. You can think everything from gay marriage. The Conservative Party has adjusted itself, a bit like the British Constitution in a sense. It shifts. It's not like the Labour Party. You have ideological positions on things and you have to have votes in conference to change them. The Conservative Party doesn't have any of that. We kind of move like tectonic plates rather slowly and gradually, and sometimes on big things. And I think on Europe we have done that. There is a big difference between how a single issue party like the Brexit Party and a Conservative Party would approach an issue like this. For them, there is an absolute position. For me, what I want to do is ensure that if this is what the British people want, then we have to do it, but we have to do it in a way that actually makes this manageable and workable. I think that's the big difference.
But it does underline your point that when Iain Duncan Smith was leader of the party, which he was for several years, it was not the policy of the Conservative Party to leave the European Union. And Boris Johnson only decided he was a Brexiteer and was going to be on that side of the argument that we should leave the European Union about the night before the referendum campaign started. So 3 years later, somebody like me, let's say fortunately, as I'm retiring from a personal point of view, I'm just bemused by the extraordinary change that's come over the Conservative Party.
Can I ask you to gaze into the crystal ball, which is pretty smoky, even without your cigar smoke around it at the moment? If we come back with another hung parliament after this rolling of the dice, what do you think happens then, Ken?
Well, no one will form a coalition with Boris, I don't think. I think the Conservative Party will be the big party in opposition. Now, how on earth you're going to get the Labour Party, the Scottish Nationalists and the Liberal Democrats to agree what day of the week it is, I'm not quite sure.
We're back to square one.
They will struggle to form a coalition government, and it probably, unless the atmosphere of politics changes, won't last very long. Again, the only thing I feel certain about is probably if you have a coalition, they will insist on a second referendum, which I'm not particularly in favour of myself. I didn't like the first one, so I'm not keen on a second one and its effect it has on political debate. And I also feel very reasonably confident it certainly won't be led by Jeremy Corbyn as the Prime Minister. But other than that, I shall leave those three parties to sort it out amongst themselves.
But we could be looking at
the majority.
January the 31st as a hard deadline, die-in-a-ditch deadline, could go the way of October 31st, under Ken's theory. Do you think, could you?
Yeah, I mean, the point is, well, it's not, I mean, you asked them a very specific question, what if we come back with a hung parliament? Of course, a hung parliament, I think, would be an unmitigated disaster right now because, and not just for us, I think the thing that I find, I've got a lot of friends who live and work in Europe, and all they're saying now is, for God's sake, just get a decision done and do it because it's affecting them. And so I don't think there's any great triumph in Brussels. If we come back with a hung parliament, they're all going to put their heads in their hands and go, for God's sake, where is this going?
We'd crash through the January 31st barrier.
Well, I don't know what the European Union do. They may take a decision to say...
I think, agreed. We're not going to crash through the 31st barrier with no deal, unless Nigel Farage does spectacularly well. In my opinion, people with common sense on both sides of the channel, whether they're Brexiteers or Remainers or whatever they are, do understand that we need to have a clear withdrawal agreement on citizens' rights, on the money, and of course on customs and border controls and all this kind of stuff.
When some of your colleagues, your like-minded colleagues who lost the whip were called into the Prime Minister's office this week and offered the whip back, they were told, and of course, if you're coming back into Parliament, you'll vote for my deal, or if the deal is defeated, you'll support Brexit.
Yeah, well, I think most of them, you'll find, did vote for the deal.
Yeah, but the point he was making was you'll back no deal. That's what point Boris Johnson was making to them in his office.
Well, I don't think any of them agreed to that. I'd not heard that.
Well, they
version
gulped,
of
I'm told, the ones who were coming back, but
gulped.
they realised what he was saying.
What on earth are they doing? Agree? I mean, Boris, when he first took over, was resigned to no deal. That's why we had, and he wanted to have an election before it, and he wanted to blame Brussels and the Europeans and blame Parliament for it, and then he'd sort it out, he did. And then when we passed the Benn Act, then he was desperate to get a deal, which is his real preference if he thought of free ocean. And he desperately got this quick deal. He can't go back to saying, oh, we'll all crash out with no deal. And whatever the Europeans say, people, the government of the Republic of Ireland and Belgium and Holland will not want no deal. Anybody of the slightest common sense will just take as long as it takes to get a withdrawal agreement in place. Bearing in mind that doesn't end anything, because then you start, I hope with the new government here, that new government will need to settle down to negotiating the long-term arrangements on policing, security, medicines licensing, and of course trade, customs, investments, and financial regulation, all that kind of thing.
There would be another extension, wouldn't there, Iain, if Parliament couldn't pass the deal? It might be one that a Parliament imposed on him.
Your hint is all around there being a hung Parliament.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually don't think there'll be a hung Parliament this time round. I think the reason the hung Parliament in 2017 was that, first of all, the public didn't want another election. They were tired already, and they were fed up with chewing each other off in their families, and they wanted just to settle down. So they were angry with us for calling it. The second thing is, we have never, in my political lifetime, and I bet you in Ken's as well, never entered an election without any plan whatsoever and then come up with some manifesto that apparently two people wrote behind closed doors and launched on an unsuspecting party. The whole thing, if you write a book about how not to fight an election, 2017 is the model. Try to have one issue, you can't do it. Have a manifesto that nobody knew about. Try and launch a policy, the old rule that you can't fatten a pig on market day. We tried to do that. We've proved it forever that you'll never be able to do that again. A big policy on social care launched onto the world in the middle of an election. Everything was wrong about that. So and then nobody knew who Jeremy Corbyn was out there. We all thought they did here because we knew who he was. But the thing about the public is you suddenly realise actually they don't really watch the news half the time, and they don't know what's going on, and they're not that interested until they're asked to make a decision. So I think that this time round there'll be a greater level of clarity. I do think all the issues will be up for grabs this time. I mean, last election we didn't even have a day on the economy. You know, in your whole political lifetime, Ken, did you ever fight an election where Conservatives didn't want to get to the economy?
No, you've very adequately described the last election. I agree. I
think this one will be a different election.
Anybody's found Brenda of Bristol and asked her what she thinks about calling an election this
time.
Probably
not much to ask
actually. And I hope you're right, because at the moment, when we obviously think with this time we're going to have a clear, grown-up, sensible debate, and there are clear policies and choices and all the rest of it. I don't think we're there yet.
No, probably not.
I have no idea
and you think
how the two big parties are going to campaign. And I say that the danger is that the only people with clear policies are the Liberal Democrats, if you're that way inclined, or the Brexit Party, if you're that way inclined. And the two big parties are, in both cases, all in confusion.
On the economy, you think your old party, because you're not yet back, is spraying money around without any knowledge of how it's going to...
We're apparently not... We can't have a budget. We're not allowed to have a budget. The OBR is threatening to start publishing its forecasts for the public finances and the economy, which will not make very cheerful reading, I think. And I'm being a little unfair, but I don't think too unkind, when I say that the two big parties are slogging it out about who's going to spend most money on the most politically popular public services, police and health and schools. Again, social care, which needs a policy and money because of the huge pressures upon it, isn't being mentioned by anybody because it's too complicated, and I don't think either of them can repeat the mistake which, as Iain quite rightly said, was made last time. Social care policy is going to be very difficult. Governments have to take tough and difficult decisions. You do not launch them in the middle of an election campaign, which is completely crazy. I mean, the title dementia tax was a stupid tag to apply to it, but within 2 days, Theresa was abandoning the entire policy, claiming that nothing had changed, but she was no longer pursuing it.
Wasn't a great election.
Who knows? I mean, every time I've tried to forecast what's going to happen in the present climate and thought something really stupid is going to happen tomorrow, I've always been wrong, because something even more stupid that I'd never thought of has actually occurred. So it's far too soon to start telling what exactly is going to happen during the next 6 weeks of this campaign.
Just before we leave this hung Parliament, can I ask you about an episode that tantalised everybody? It came and went, and it was talk of caretaker government.
Yes,
in your last years in this House, or last months in this House, it was talked of that you could have found yourself as Prime Minister.
Yes, that was rather a fun. I thought that was rather a fun coda to my career as well. But you'd be glad to know I never took it terribly seriously. I mean, the idea, many things could have happened and haven't. It was conceivable that this strange majority, which had stopped No Deal and got the extension to avoid the cliff edge, which was about to occur if we weren't careful, that it is conceivable they could have come together and passed a vote of no confidence and then tried to form a government. And lots of fun stuff appeared as to who was going to be Prime Minister, which is always entertaining. And again, maybe nostalgic. It used to be more serious rumours in the past. I've tried once or twice, and Iain got there once. But the more important thing was, if you were ever going to have a cross-party government, what exactly is everybody agreed they're going to do? So my only reaction normally when it was put to me was, well, first get everybody signed up in blood to the precise details of what this temporary government is going to do. If you've got the Scott Nats, the Liberals, the Labour Party, the 21 rebel Conservatives and all the stray Labour independents and Anna Soubry and everybody all signed up to what it's going to do in a withdrawal agreement, and then, when is it going to have an election? Are we in favour of a second referendum or against it? If that's all agreed, then you can have a government for a few weeks, and actually you could get somebody from a nearby bus stop to be Prime Minister, because it won't make that much difference. Might be preferable to have some veteran MP who's been in government, like Margaret Beckett or Harriet Harman or somebody, or, as people were suggesting, me. But there never seemed to me any likelihood that you were going to get this strange collection of people to agree precisely what they wanted to do.
You're smiling now, Iain. But
well, I'm smiling because
your blood would have boiled if
I was well have been amused by it if anybody had tried to make it happen.
One thing I did know was that the dilemma wasn't Ken's or anybody else. The dilemma was, of course, the Labour parties, because if you're the official opposition and then everyone agrees to gather together to do something because you can just about get a majority, but the one thing that unites all of them is that they're not having the leader of the Labour Party run it. That's not good for the Labour Party, and so I think that tells you pretty much everything you need to know.
Well, I think only Jeremy felt that strongly, I think. But and actually, the historical precedents were against it. We have had more serious governments of national unity at times of crisis, twice in war, and the nearest analogy in 1931, the Great Crash.
Yes,
and in
national government.
In none of those cases, the leader of the national government was not the leader of the opposition. So all this rubbish that came out of the Labour Party saying, well, he's the leader of the opposition, he's got to lead it, I'm afraid history, apart from common sense and politics, was very much against that. When I say you could have got somebody at the nearest bus stop, the one person who couldn't select was Jeremy Corbyn. I think,
yes,
to be
that was, funnily enough, that united everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you were a young man now, would you join the Conservative Party?
Not at this moment, no. I have to say candidly, I don't think I would.
Who would you be voting for in the general election?
I've voted Conservative every election in my life.
Wasn't quite my question.
No, well, I think I once previously sort of rather recklessly in public said, am I going to be tempted to cast an Orpington-type protest vote, which fortunately only people my age know what I'm talking about. Getting back to the
Lib Dem by-election triumph. Have we got a clue there?
The first by-election triumph of modern politics, when the Orpington by-election absolutely shocked the Macmillan government, I think, in my youth.
In the privacy of the polling station, it might be Lib Dem.
I think 40-odd% of the public have not voted for the same party in the 3 elections, and I mean, I'm a Conservative. I shall go back to voting Conservative.
Go back to it one day.
Yeah, but I'm slightly, teasing you and myself by saying it's not as certain as it has been in previous elections.
Well, it was because Ken used to vote for himself in the previous elections.
That's right. It depends what sort of campaign the party run. If we really do make ourselves the Brexit party under our brand, my loyalty is going to be strained absolutely.
Doesn't that shock you?
I'm not voting for some crazy right-wing nationalist organisation calling itself a Conservative government, but that, I think, is laying it on a bit. I don't think that's where we'll wind up.
Doesn't that worry you, shock you even?
Well, I just think I agree with Ken's final statement, which is that's not where we are, it's not where we'll be.
Yes, but here's Ken Clarke sitting next to you saying he struggles with the idea of saying he will vote Conservative and he wouldn't join it as a young man. Doesn't that worry you?
Well, I think it just says how dominant this issue of Brexit has become in everybody's minds, in as far as it dominates Ken's and mine. The point I make, though, is it is an issue we have to settle because we have to get to the other issues, which for everybody's lives are probably far, far more important.
Iain Duncan Smith, Kenneth Clarke, thank you both very much indeed for your time.
Pleasure.